6 years ago, we bought a trawler that was sunk in a cyclone. Since then, we've been going hell for leather to get this thing in the water. We're turning it into an expedition boat to head to some of the most remote places on the planet. This week we're smoothing out some of the rough bits on our new galley install.
I've hung around this place too long. It's time for me to be moving on.
When you're mixing epoxies like this, you want to dig in to the bottom and push it down through the top. What that does is it forces all of the molecules to interact with each other. So you can see here it's going cleaner and cleaner into one colour. It was a dark green and a white compound, and now it's starting to become that lime green. Just that constant folding is the best mixing technique you can get for epoxies. See how consistent that colour is? That's what you're looking for, that real beautiful single colour. It's almost impossible to get 100%, but you'll get it really, really close. And if you do find any large chunks, just keep folding them in. You've got plenty of mixing time with this. It won't go hard on you for at least probably an hour, so you've still got a good amount of working time with this stuff. This goo is an epoxy fairing compound made by Jotun, and you can see we're just trying to fill up any low spot we can see, filling in all of the screw heads where they've gone below the surface level of the ply. So we need to get it right into the corner, so easiest tool that we have is a finger, and we just smash it in. You're just wanting plenty in there, that's why we're not being pretty about it at this stage. We'll clean it up in a second. Once we've basically got everything filled up, we get a radius, in this case it's just a piece of pipe, and drag it along. It'll push everything into the corner and you'll get a nice smooth radius in that corner that you want. You get a lot of overfill like what you can sort of see. Do a couple of runs just to make sure that it's really clean and lovely in that corner. And then you can go through with a spatula and just clean off the excess, and about 20 minutes later you can come back with water on your finger and just smear over the top of it, and it cleans it all up nicely.
Oh, heavy.
Is that the direction we want?
Thank God for steel tip boots.
Did you balance it on?
I balance it on them.
Yeah. They're good for that sort of stuff, eh?
Yeah.
I do that all the time with my other boots. Actually, that might be why they're dead.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense. Nice, yep. We had quite a lot of discussions with patrons, and Donald suggested more coats of paint, particularly in the walking area. That's what we're doing today. It doesn't have to be a really deep sand, it's just to rough up the surface so the next coat clings to the undercoat.
We don't need to do under the benches either, because it's got plenty of coverage in those areas.
That's right. And then we'll paint, but we're thinking, what, 4 coats? 3 or 4 coats, aren't we? Like
Yeah,
quite double what we've got on everywhere else on the floor. We're going to use a 2-pack epoxy fairing coat. We're going to fill, so I'm going to sand back, we're going to fill anything that's kind of like a dip. We're going to fill it, and we're going to try and flatten out a bit of the deck, and then we'll put those 3 or 4 coats over top of that.
Tricks when fairing. So this is just 40 grit, so it's pretty coarse at this stage, but you can sort of see how the edges are almost translucent. They're getting quite clear. You'll see this one here, I haven't quite sanded enough. You've got a sharp line just there where the filler still is. So it needs to be like this edge here, where it basically starts to just feather off to nothing and be translucent. That's how you know that you're getting it down to the right level. If it's still bulbous, or you've got really defined lines, this one here is actually a depression. I dug down into it really quite solidly, so that's why this line's quite pronounced. But you can sort of see over here where it feathers off. Again, that's what you're looking for, is that feather basically, and you know that you're going to have a nice, flush, beautiful surface. Trick to mixing epoxy is whatever ratio, they all have different ratios depending on the brand. This is 5:1. Doesn't really make any real difference. They're all just designed to work with each other at the right ratio. But you want to mix it until it's pretty much crystal clear. There'll be air bubbles and stuff, that's normal, and you can let those sit. You can sit the resin for a couple of minutes and a lot of those air bubbles come to the surface. In terms of mixing, it doesn't really make a lot of difference having air bubbles or not. You're going to get them. There's no real way of avoiding that. But you do want to give it a hell of a mix to make sure that it's fully, both parts, part A and part B are touching each other. You want it to be fully catalysed. Because if you get the mixing wrong, i.e. the ratios are wrong, or you don't mix it enough and they're not touching each other, i.e. part A and part B aren't touching each other, you just end up with this disgusting clear goop that takes a hell of a lot of acetone to get off your parts. But if you get epoxy right, it's absolutely phenomenal stuff. Right, I am not going to let this sit because it's starting to heat, because it's pretty warm in Australia right now. You can get different hardeners, so some set faster and slower than others. So if you're in colder climates, you basically want quite an aggressive part B hardener. If you're in a stinking hot climate like Aussie, you want one that's going to take a while to set. I don't know what this one is, it's just whatever comes from the shop. I'm assuming it's the right one for Aussie. Seems to work fine every time, but you do have to not really muck around, crack on, get it in, get it done. You don't want it to set on you, it's pretty hard to work with when it does. We are focusing on the edges where water will likely run in. End grains, etc. on timber are always a challenging bit where the water will run up. Ironically, steel also has a grain. So when they make steel, the little steel molecules, or whatever the hell it is, they all align up, depending on how it's made, cold rolled, hot rolled, that sort of thing. They align and you end up with an actual grain on steel. So if you ever buy a piece of, say, flat bar, 100mm by 6mm, something like that, the grains run like timber. They run along the length of that plank of steel. A little bit of interesting factoid there for you. This aggressive brushing technique that I'm using will not deliver a magical surface, but this is on the inside where no one's ever going to see it. I don't need a magical surface. I need to make sure water ain't going to get anywhere near this wood. So that's why we are just belting it on. Quite a thick coat. Cover up all of our end grains of that ply. Don't want any drama there. Not that it matters that you get any of this dust in, because it's all epoxy furring compound, epoxy resin. It's all basically the same stuff, and the difference is just the filler compounds. So they start with resin and then they add micro balloons or whatever particular type of furring they want to put in there. Because I want a really lovely surface on this front, I am being a bit more, still going fast, but I'm being a little bit more pedantic about my brush strokes. Again, end grains of plywood, real easy place for water to sap up. The beauty with 2-pack is you can do a couple of coats quite fast. So unlike a single pack where you're relying on it basically evaporating solvents out into the atmosphere to dry, 2-pack will start setting no matter what. It's a chemical reaction between the two parts, so the bloody stuff will set underwater if you let it. And what that means is when you're trying to layer up heaps of material onto your surface like this, you can do a coat and then 5 minutes later come back and do another coat over top of that, and you'll end up with the two of them chemically setting toward, against each other. They'll bond into each other, but because you've already allowed that chemical reaction process to start taking place because of the two parts being mixed together, you can really start to build up the thickness. Now, that's not ideal if you want an absolute mirror finish. You want to do lots and lots and lots of thin layers if you want that. However, if that's not what you're after, and you're just after bucket loads of protection, then this is a great way of doing it. Here's a plinth I prepared earlier. I haven't sanded this one fully, but that's not going to stop me from painting out the inside of it. Right, this is our visible surface. Now this epoxy has only been on here for probably 6 hours or so, this clear epoxy. So it's going to be relatively soft compared to this paint. When I say soft, I don't mean tacky, I mean chemically bondable. So this is an epoxy paint that I'm putting on. It's a high build epoxy 2-pack. And by putting it on relatively soon after the clear coat epoxy's on there, it means that it's going to dig in, which is what you want when you're joining paint layers together. You can mechanically do it with a sander. We've done that in places on this particular thing, but it's way better if you can get it to be chemically bound. Right, the stuff that I'm using is a high build epoxy 2-pack. High build basically means that it's really thick, and the beauty of a high build is when you sand it, it's like painting with a bit of filler in the paint, if that makes sense, because it actually does have fillers in the paint. And it smooths out any little dimples or imperfections. So that's why I'm not real concerned that I might have dimples and imperfections in this, because this stuff will do the business and take it out. People sometimes wonder why we paint with tiny paintbrushes and rollers. The shit that has been said about it. There's a reason for it. This brush that I'm using here, we buy 2 of them for $2.30 in a pack. A 2-pack, if you will. For all my Kiwi bros out there. It's a test pot brush, but the bristles on this are exactly the same as the really expensive ones. So you end up with an awesome finish out of a real cheap brush. If I was to buy a 2-inch brush, exactly the same bristles and everything, same make, they're like $15. So yeah, it's a bit slower going with this, but when you're using hundreds of brushes a year, starts to add up. Trick to getting a really nice finish with a brush is belt the paint on, like so. Fill all your little holes and whatnot up. Make sure you got good coverage over everything. And then run back from the dry side to the wet side. So I'm starting over here on the dry, I'm finishing up over there. So you pull the brush along nice and slow and then gently lift up. You want to be even. If you've got self-leveling paint, that's called tipping, and if you've got self-leveling paint, you'll end up with a really clear... Hello! Still painting. How are you doing? So we want to make sure we get all of our daggy bits out by doing a nice tip across all the surfaces. And that's going to dry quite nice, and then whatever doesn't go nice will be sanded because of the high build nature. Where these marks are here around on the floor, that's where the cabinets sit. So it's not critical that we fear underneath on this side, because you're never going to see it, it's going to be under a cabinet. This side is important though, because this is where you walk. So what we're going to do is bring a nice even fairing down, probably overlap quite a bit, like come over here quite a bit, but it'll blend this right in, get rid of any sort of lumps and bumps, because as you can see here, paint's already wearing off on the welds. As we're dragging stuff in and bashing things around, as we're going to for years and years on this boat, we need to protect it from that. So we are going to layer some epoxy fairing compound, that stuff there, onto our lovely new 2-pack floor, and then we're going to start building up a few more layers. Important thing to remember throughout all of this, I have never done this before, so here goes. It's really important at this point to point out that if you know the correct techniques to fair a floor and I'm not doing the right ones, yell at the screen very loudly.
little handle on the back of this.
Yeah. Better than all the bumps though. That's great. Wow. Wow, that's awesome.
I think that'll do for the first skim.
You're just going to come in faster than you think, you know?
Yeah.
First skim. So it's reasonably thick in the middle, maybe 10 mil, something like that. Maybe not that thick, 6 mil. But what I suspect is we're going to have to do 2 layers. So then a patch in the middle there, and then a patch over there. That's the bulk of the stuff to deal with. That was the worst bit, obviously, over in that big corner there. So we'll let that harden overnight. We'll come back in the morning and we'll give that a good sand. Get it nice and flat, probably just belt it up with probably a 60 grit, something like that. Get it nice and flat. I've got a longboard. It's a 12-inch longboard, and I'll try and flatten it out with that. So that's us on the boat for tonight. We'll go and, yeah, we're actually going to go off the boat now. Going to have a break.
This is just a severe thunderstorm warning for around us, but on the radar it looks like a couple of cells might come across us.
All right.
Those bottom ones near Harvey Bay are quite moving up towards us. So.
We have to get the plinth out of the weather. So we're back in the Thunderdome. I got to clean up a mess I made yesterday.
So Dame's going to use the 40 grit on the orbital. We're going to try and just do a light skim over all of the filler. And we're just aiming for smooth, not perfectly flat. It doesn't have to be perfect here. It's just smooth so that no surfaces underneath start rubbing off. The paint can stay intact. We won't know whether there's a second coat to do until he's finished, and we'll see what the finish looks like. While Damien finishes sanding the deck of the galley, I'm filling this little gap here between the 2 panels on the side of the walls, both walls, in the cabin on the starboard side. It's just untidy and we just want to finish it off. We want to get this room ready to be used. Quick wipe down with acetone before painting. A thorough mix. While Damien finished the painting, I had help from our lovely friend Karen, who came in to help us sort some stuff out. She's an amazing organiser. She helped me sort out downstairs on the starboard side cabin. I had to get some storage sorted out. We got the stainless pile cleared away, much to Damien's dissatisfaction, and a whole bunch more. Thanks so much for all your help, Karen. So I'm getting this room finished, so I've just filled some stuff on the wall and I'm going to sand that today and then we'll paint that tonight. But in the meantime, I've got to clear the room out.
Yes.
And I've got to reorganise the storage out there. So I'm thinking of putting most things over there in that little bit beside the stairs.
Yeah.
We had it all sort of topped to the roof over there before, and we had to move everything to get stuff organised. Oh, it's going to rain again, I think. Maybe we should just do the downstairs cabin.
I'm not scared of rain.
You sure? Cool.
At least
See if it gets a bit heavier.
it's not cold.
I'll show you what we're doing and then I'll bring the ute around.
I never thought about you guys in the rain. I just thought, oh, this rain's lovely. Not lovely for trying to do shit.
No, it's too hard. Anything wood, it just gets ruined straight away.
Oh, his little memorabilia pile.
Yeah.
So many times I just have a chuckle and they're like, what are you watching, TikTok? No, watching the Brupeg.
So we're gonna work on this. So the stainless, that's all this shiny stuff.
And then you
Loads
sell
of-
that, don't you?
Yeah, we just take it into the scrappy and they give us a price for it. Yeah. So we did the mild
Anyone with a
steel.
bobcat?
Well, the thing is, we're going to probably use some of it, so we've got to just decide as we go what we'll keep and what we won't.
Is there a current chuck pile?
Yeah, well, I'm going to bring the ute in here,
Yep.
so we'll head everything over this side. And what I would love to do is a wee bit of a tidy up as I go too. Like, there's lots of shit everywhere because it's just never clean. So,
Yeah.
like
My
ropes
forte,
and.
Jess. It's my forte.
I thought that would be your element. Oh my god, I can't believe we're getting to this pile.
Keeping these monstrosities.
Wow. Geez, that's gorgeous. I don't think we'll use it though.
Look at you, little metal lover.
God, that's heavy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I might just put that by the truck and I'll get Dave to double check that he doesn't want that. Thanks.
I'll put it in the. This is the not sure.
I'm not sure well.
Long-time viewers will remember our anchor locker, where we needed to find a solution to stop the paint getting bashed off by the anchor chain. Our Patreon mate Bill Baggins helped us come up with an idea of using old conveyor belt to protect the sides. We were at the scrappy the other day and we found a stonking great piece, so we picked it up and hauled it back to Brupeg.
Hang on. This one's stuck on there.
Right.
Yep.
Go. Hey?
You're going in the ute.
No, we come out of the ute.
Oh, yeah.
We're just trying to get out of the way of you and your gadgets.
Oh, flatten it
We
out.
picked it up from the scrappy. There was like half a foot of bloody bog that this was sitting in. Oh, thanks, Liz.
Here in the Australian workyard, we are going to witness something that only happens around once a year. The tan-crested workboot. They emerge from their hiding place in the mornings. They are not a nocturnal creature. They generally come out with others, and they mate for life, staying as a pair until their death. Rarely seen on their own in the wild, this tan-crested workboot has definitely seen better days. You can tell by the battle scars it's wearing, the rough appearance of its forward mane, and also the zip ties holding it together. Crested workboots are very territorial, and this one has spotted a challenge. The younger workboot is likely more agile than its older adversary. Oh, but there's quite a kerfuffle! It appears our younger workboot has got the older boot to turn tail. And as the older boot slinks off into the distance, its time in the sun is over. Now begins the reign of the new workboot. Our younger workboot will now go ahead and find a mate. He'll find just the right one. They'll pair up for life, and that will be the story of the tan-crested workboot.
For those that haven't seen it before, this is an air sander. This is something we don't use very often, but it's really fast compared to an orbital, and it's a bigger disc, so it takes off more area for the same amount of work. So that's sanded enough. It's not perfect, so you can sort of see where it's light grey. That's basically where we've sanded it down nice and smooth, and where it's those little spots of dark grey, that's where there's a low spot. If we wanted to go mental on this, we'd do another coat of the grey, and then we'd just go and carry on sanding with our 120 and get that nice and absolutely perfect, and the whole thing would come up looking like that smooth, beautiful grey, and that means that you've got it all down to the same level. We don't need that. You're never actually going to see the surface. The cupboards are all going to be sitting on top of it. I just wanted to make sure that it was as sort of well coated and good as we can get it. We're going to do 2 layers of paint over top of this now, but we know that it's sort of smooth enough and straight enough that we can do that without thinking. What I do need to do is deal with this front edge. So this is the edge you're going to see, and I want this to be really beautiful and whatever. So that's why we've got the nice radius in that corner. We're going to go through now and skim this back, so I have to be pretty careful. I'm going to use the air sander just because it's fast. I'm going to be pretty careful and skim this down, and then same deal with the top and this underside surface here. And then I'll probably hand sand in that radius just to get that sort of nice and lovely. Don't want to put the edge of the sander into that. Yeah, and then once we've got that done, we can start layering up our top coat and get that really beautiful. We are going to do a radius on the bottom here, so this, where the plinth basically glues onto the 2-pack and the galley floor, we're going to radius that out as well. We're going to do a 20mm radius, so quite a big radius, bigger than this one in here, and that'll all be painted up as well. So we're going to do quite a few layers on that. Reason being, I don't want any mould or rubbish or whatnot to get inside this area here, and I want to build it so that we can drop plenty of water in the galley and it doesn't affect these plinths at all. Right, well, we won't use that one. I just got my air gun out to give this a nice clean off, to be, you know, good workmanship and all that sort of stuff. And the air line, the little netto fitting that it connects to, and the gun all went 3 separate ways, so I think we'll call that gun stuffed. Have to resort to a manual air gun. Right, we need to get the little plinth done, so you can go and sit over there for a bit. Okay, because this is a much smaller little plinth, you want to use a much smaller sander, obviously. Alright, that's not entirely true. I can't actually find the bloody discs for my 6-inch sander, so we're going to use the wee one. What we're left with, lovely smooth front. This is the face that you see. This is the underside of the visual part, if that makes sense. You can sort of see little spots in where the grey has been feathered in, and that's basically filled up any dimples that were in the epoxy that we put on there earlier. So you can sort of see this is raw epoxy on the inside. It's pretty brutal, does the job, but this one out here, we wanted it to look lovely, and I think it does. One of the jobs yet to happen is we need to do a bunch of sandblasting up around the wings. You can sort of see there's pads of bare steel, and then also underneath we've got panels that we've replaced previously on the boat. That's all rusty, plain mild steel, needs to be dealt with. However, our sandblaster is pretty small and I have to throw this tank out, so we are thinking of using it to hot rod our sandblaster and use that as the sand pot rather than the red pot that you normally see us use. If we were to swap over and use that as part of our sandblasting system,
We normally get about 10 minutes out of a red pot, and then we have to refill it. And it's a bit of a pain having to stop and start all the time. You get in a bit of a rhythm, and then you have to sort of stop, you're done. Whereas with that thing there, it's probably 3 times, maybe 4 times the volume. So we'll be able to blast for, you know, a good sort of 30, 40 minutes at a time. Takes a bit more to fill it up. It'll probably take, I don't know, 90 litres of sand, something like that, rather than the, I think we're about 30 in the little red one, roughly. But yeah, it's going to be much nicer, and we've got to throw that tank out anyway, so it's not a hard job just to weld the fittings top and bottom and turn it into a sandblaster. Started to clear some of our paint out of the engine bay today. This is paint to be used on Brupeg. That didn't last long. Bucketing down with rain again. With rain stopping play for a while, and it just being too awkward to sand out there, because as soon as you get something sanded, it starts raining, you've got to move it back in, pull it back out, etc. I've decided to start sanding in a more formal location, the office. So doors getting shut, rest of the boat's getting sealed off, and this will get belted out. I just need to sand the ends. I realised I didn't get to those before it started raining, and then we'll give it an acetone wipe, yeah, we can start painting. So we're going to be putting the polyurethane, the same stuff that we put on the floor, the yellow or cream coloured polyurethane, that's going on this as well, for no other reason than it's a really hardy paint. It dries like really, really hard. It's quite lovely. So we're going to be using that on this to make sure it's all sealed up well. I've got the vacuum cleaner set up on the orbital. Doesn't leave a lot of dust when you do it that way, so it's pretty good. And then we'll just shut the door off and put the polyurethane. We're going to use the same polyurethane that we put on the floor, the cream coloured polyurethane. It's going to be going over this. We'll basically coat the entire thing. I'm not going to bother about right underneath, because that's got 2 thick layers of epoxy resin. That's probably about 2.5 millimeters thick of actual resin now. It's pretty ludicrous. So there's no need to put anything on that. That's well sealed. And 2 layers means that you've sort of got any pinholes from the first layer with the second. So I'm confident about that. The top, however, we've given it a skim, and there's a couple of bits where we've gone a bit light. So definitely want to put a couple of coats on this. And we're also going to be coating these wooden beams. So they are epoxied, but we're going to give them a coat as well, just so that they're sealed up nice and tight, because this is the office for Jess. She spends most of her time in here editing, and it has to be chemically safe. So we can't have any sort of wood that's open, so that's why we make sure that we go a bit sort of berserk with all of our sealing and so on.
I've said it many times, I know I would change my ways, I know for sure. When all the crows decide to meet, they settle down beneath my feet. I've got it right and I got it wrong, but I learned my lesson hanging on. Come sit here with me by the fire and let it go for a little while. So be here as the night starts falling. Let my fingers walk over your head. We got nothing to be scared of.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you next week.